Piro Tictocs, Piro Tictocs, half Piro Tictocs, call them what you like. That's what we're going to be looking at today. We'll start in the simulator using the step-by-step method and the Piro Trainer. Now when you start learning these, you may have a natural direction that just seems to work instinctively and you just go out and you fly them. However, if you're struggling with them or you're trying to change an orientation and it's simply not working, it might be a good time to break it down and go through it step by step. This seems to be quite a common thing when learning new maneuvers, is that you will have a natural direction that just seems to work. However, because you haven't broken it down, it can be tricky to learn in new orientations. So let's get on the simulator and we'll go through some of the prerequisites. Now this is going to sound kind of obvious, but you will need to be able to do Tictocs to a really high standard. So this is going to be nose up Tictocs, and you need to be able to move them left and right, and you also need to be able to move them up and down. And the reason you need really good control is that the Piro Tictoc is still a Tictoc at heart. I mean, that is how it stays in the air and that is how you keep control of it. So you need to be able to make it move further out and then bring it back in again. You need to be able to slow it down and then speed it up. And then all of that you need to be able to do nose down as well. So we need to be able to move it over to the right, move it over to the left, and then bring it back to center, all while keeping some similar sort of height. And then once it's back in the center, you need to be able to take it up and hold it there, and then bring it down again, back to where it was, and then push it out and bring it back. And both of these orientations, nose up and nose down, are very important because this is actually how you control the placement of the Piro Tictoc. So we'll change the speeds as well, and do fast. So you need to be able to do all of that before we even start looking at the Piro Tictocs. So we're going to start in the simulator and we're going to use the no collective trainer, which I've got bound to the T key. So I just put the model where I want it, press T, and it goes straight into that Piro Trainer. And the first position is going to be nose down at 45 degrees. And I've got the mode 2 in the middle, and I've got mode 1 on the left. So that first position, nose down 45 degrees. And then the second position is going to be nose to the right at knife edge. And you can see the main shaft is pointing straight at us. So we're going to go from that position 1 to position 2, and then we'll do all 4 positions. So number 3 is going to be nose in, nose up, and 4 will be nose left, knife edge. So that'll be 1 at 45 degrees, and then 2 knife edge, nose right. Now, when you move to that number 2 position, you need to get the model absolutely perfect. So the main shaft needs to be pointing exactly at you, and you need to see an even amount of skids on both on the top and the bottom end. And the reason for this is that the model is in an unfamiliar position, and you're going to give the wrong inputs. And it's going to take a second or two just to get it absolutely perfect. And this is all completely normal. You want to get the wrong inputs, you want to learn, figure out what you're doing wrong, because you don't spend a lot of time in this position. And the third position is going to be nose up, nose in, and exactly the same thing. So slowly bring it over. The model should be at 45 degrees and the main shaft should be vertical, or at least in line. So nose right, and then nose up. And you just kind of switch back and forth between those. And we'll go to the 4th position, which is nose left, and that's knife edge, and you want to make sure it's absolutely perfect again. And you will struggle in the beginning. You will put the sticks in the wrong way and the model will move the wrong way, and it'll actually take you 10 seconds to get the model to actually settle down. But this is part of the learning process. You have to go through this. And then from there, we can go back to the start position, which is nose in, nose down. So we can slowly go through all 4 of those positions again. And you want to be sure to correct each time, because the correcting is the really important bit. That's where you're learning. Because if you can't correct quick enough, what happens is you just tend to learn bad habits as you go through that point. Right. And if we reverse it and go the other way, because we're learning all 4 positions, we might as well do it backwards as well. Sure, it might not feel as natural when you're actually flying it, but there is value in actually moving it that way. So the other way we can do this one is we can start from flat position. So from flat, we'll still go to the same position to the nose right, and then we'll go flat nose in, inverted, knife edge nose left, and then flat upright. And go back the other way as well. So this is just, instead of having the 45 degrees, we're now going to be going flat at each end. And where this comes in useful is you're just controlling the amount or how far you're going to go in each Tictoc, because it is still a Tictoc. And you just want to be able to control, does it need to be at 45 or flat? And now you can just keep working on that. So we'll switch between the 45s and the flats, and then we'll go left rudder. You just want to make sure you're hitting each of those points absolutely perfectly. And if you want, pause, correct it, because that's how you're going to learn. And try and get it as smooth as possible. And very quickly you should find that this just starts working. You kind of meet the points exactly where you want them. The fingers do what you actually intend them to do. And the weakest point is probably going to be nose left, knife edge nose left. It's not a position you practice often, and it just seems to be the one that a lot of pilots skip out. So here we're doing the 45s again, and then reversing the directions. And the whole time you want to make sure that that main shaft is lined up perfectly with your eyesight. So it's either pointing directly at you or somewhere in that line where it's going vertical. And that's one of the weaknesses or one of the problems that I see most often, is that the main shaft tends to move around a bit, so it tends to point left and right. But we'll talk about that later. So you just keep practicing this, keep it smooth, make sure that the main shaft is keeping straight, and you can do them flat and at 45. So now we're going to come out of the Piro Trainer and just go into the regular simulator, and we're going to do some hesitation Piro Tictocs. So this is where we're going to do mini rainbows or rainbows, and we're going to hit each of those 4 positions. And then we're going to do it in reverse as well, because we did learn all 4 positions going both ways. And you want to make sure at the top of the rainbow or the mini rainbow, you're perfectly knife edge and the boom is horizontal. And if you're finding that the mini rainbows aren't quite giving you enough time or enough hang time to actually control the model properly, you can turn it into a proper rainbow. So nice and high. And then as you reach that point at the top, give a brief hesitation and then carry on. And these hesitations are actually really useful because they're forcing you to not just go through the maneuver and hang on to the sticks. They're actually forcing you to come off the sticks, center the position, and then restart it. So it's a really good exercise to do, and it tends to make your Piro Tictocs a lot purer as well. So you don't get that main shaft wobble from left to right. And then it's just a case of making those rainbows a little bit smaller. Here we're concentrating on the nose left version. So we're constantly switching between the position 1 and 3 and then having the model nose left. Now when we start doing Piro Tictocs for the first time, I want you to think of them as 2 separate pieces. So there's going to be nose down to nose up, and then from nose up back to nose down. And the 2 endpoints is where you want to do your stabilization. So if we just do them as 2-point hesitations, then you can move them on to doing full. And then when it feels like it's going out of control, you can take it back to 2-point hesitations. So you go at each end, you stop, you stabilize, and then you go to the other side. And once you've got the feeling that it's working again and you've got it stabilized, then you can start speeding it up. And you don't want to stay there for too long. I think at this point, the more variable you can make it, the quicker you'll learn. So you want to do the hesitation versions, and then go into speeding up, and then back to hesitations. And then we're going to try and do right rudder as well. Exactly the same thing, 2-point hesitations. Once it feels stable, you can start making it a continuous maneuver. And then as soon as it gets a little bit out of shape, just bring it back to 2-point hesitations. And you'll find that the more that you practice this, the longer you will actually be able to hold it in that continuous Piro Tictoc position. And this works really well for flying outside as well. As soon as it goes anywhere near out of control, just slow it down, get control back, and then you can start speeding it up. And as I said before, the more you practice it, the longer those periods of continuous Piro Tictocking will become. So we've just been through what I consider the standard variation of the Piro Tictoc, which is starting nose in upright and doing those 4 points. However, it doesn't have to start nose in. You can also start tail in. So if you're starting from the tail in, your 4 points will be slightly different. You'll still be knife edge, nose left, but then your nose will be away at each point, at each of the 2 opposing points. So your nose away inverted, and then your nose away upright. You can also do it forward from the tail in position, but that just means you're going to be skids in, which is a little bit more difficult. Actually, it's a lot more difficult, but you can learn it in exactly the same way. So we can go into the Piro Trainer and you can learn those 4 positions and you can attack it exactly using the same method that we've just been through. And then also if you start in the nose position, but you start backwards, you'll also end up doing a skids in Piro Tictoc. And it'll be very similar 4 positions. So nose in inverted, knife edge nose left, and then nose in upright. Now you can also start them as aileron Piro Tictocs. So here we'll start at 45 degrees nose right, and then we'll hit 4 positions again, and then end up in the original position. So here, your position 2, you're going to be nose up knife edge, and position 4, you're going to be nose down knife edge. And then you can also start aileron nose left, exactly the same thing, nose down and nose up. So you just got to break it down to those 4 positions each time, very easy, and then practice it on the trainer and then go through the same method. So let's have a look at the most common issues. Now the one I see the most is corkscrewing. So this is where the main shaft is pointing left and right, and it's corkscrewing and it's not being flown properly so that the main shaft is remaining straight. So corkscrew, a proper corkscrew, is where the aileron stays all the way over to the right and you actually don't move the cyclic at all, and you're just changing collective. So we're not trying to do a corkscrew. So here you can see if I stop it there, the main shaft is pointing to the left, and then if I stop it there, the main shaft is pointing to the right. And you want that main shaft to go straight in line with you and vertical. So the way that we can fix that is we can go back to the 4 pointers. So we'll make sure that at that mid position, the main shaft is pointing straight towards you or slightly over your head. And you can just do those pauses like that. And then as you speed it up, you can see here the main shaft is remaining a little bit straighter. And that's looking much better. Not much corkscrewing at all. So the second most common issue that I see is when it drops out of the sky and you aren't actually able to stop the descent. Now what some people do is they'll just keep descending thinking they'll save it and eventually it hits the ground, which I've seen enough. So what you need to do is as it starts descending is you need to slow the Piro Tictocs down, get control of it, get it moving upwards again so you've got that inertia moving up, and then you can speed it back up again. So we're at the field and then we're going to start this slowly. So I'm starting here with 4-point hesitation. Now I have been told that this is actually more complex than the maneuver, and I think they could be right. So I actually use the 4-point hesitation as a troubleshooting device. It just helps you sort out the straightness in the middle and makes that main shaft point straight at you and stay in the vertical. So I would possibly skip that exercise when you go to the field, and I would start with something like this, which is the rainbow. So you're going to do a nice big rainbow and you're going to do a half pirouette from nose in to nose in. And if your main shaft is skewing anywhere through the maneuver, you'll find that it won't be straight. The model will get dragged over to the left or right. So this is also a really good exercise to check if that main shaft is staying straight through the maneuver. And once you've done that, you can make it a bit shorter. And from here, I would go to the 2-point hesitation. So this is where you do where you stop at each end. You just want to give a brief pause. You can even go flat. You just want to give that pause at the end, let the model stabilize, have it control so it's not moving away. And then once you've got that working well, you can move to the continuous Piro Tictocs. And at any point, if it feels uncomfortable or if it's just moving away or it's descending, you can slow it down, go back a step, go to the mini rainbows. And then when you've got control again, you speed it up. So here we're doing continuous Piro Tictocs, slow ones. You can just slowly speed it up, and you'll get to a point where you just don't have control anymore, and that's when you've gone too far and you just need to bring it back a little bit. But the more you do this over time, the faster you can get, and the quicker you'll recover as well. You'll recover that stability. So that was about as fast as I can go, so I've gone back to the slow ones again to get control. Now obviously you want to do it quite a bit higher than this. That's not a bad speed. Okay, so I'll show you what corkscrews look like. So corkscrews is when you just hold the cyclic over and you don't move it. Now if you look carefully, that you can see the main shaft is actually pointing to the left and then pointing to the right. So to get them nice and pure, you want that main shaft pointing between you and the vertical. Here we're going to do some right rudder ones. Similar thing, start slow, do the 2 pointers, 2-point hesitation, start slow, speed it up. When you get to the limit, just try and slow it down again. And that's it. So we've come to the end of the video on Piro Tictocs, and I feel a little bit like I've led you astray in terms of the 4 pointers, which I think someone said to me, you're making it way more complex than it needs to be. The 4 pointers are super advanced, and a Piro Tictoc is you just need to go out there and you just need to do it. And I think they're probably right in a way. I think the 4 pointers are really good if you're having problems with Piro Tictocs and they're turning into corkscrews and the main shaft is kind of skewing around, and they're a really good device or method for fixing that. So it's like a troubleshooting method. But I think you should be really good with the exercises that we did on the simulator. I think those are really valuable. And one thing I do find with these super complex maneuvers like the Piro Tictocs and the Piro flips is that perseverance is actually what gets you there. And listening to maybe 3 or 4 people's views on what the maneuver should be and how you're getting it right. And then once you've persevered for long enough and you've assimilated these views, it kind of starts making sense. And then one day something will just trigger it and suddenly you can do it. But it's not that one thing that's got you there. It's actually the perseverance of listening to all those other people and trying all of those things. So it's definitely something you need to just go out and try. And these exercises and everything we did on the simulator should be really helpful. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this video maybe gets you through that barrier to doing Piro Tictocs. And let me know if there's anything I've skipped or anything you want to see or anything that's helped you. It's definitely hard trying to teach people and you can't cover everything. But if you let me know what you think, I can maybe put it in a future episode. So until next time.